Tene ta tanda tambo ta hidele. Shujutan tene te jisla tanda tambo ngarange kasen chodor ge on ge jincher ge longje denge yangla. Tene te chidambe ge. Tene long ta jita ta to gulong number ta pese na roche.
First of all, good morning. And then I will now give you the reading transmission, as several of you have requested, for the daily practice associated with the Vajrapani empowerment that I gave yesterday. While receiving the transmission, please do so with a pure motivation.
Dewa dang dewi jodong dembra jurje dungal dong dunga je jodong trawa jurje dungal mebe dewa dong ba dong man trawa jurje nyering chodong ni dong tra tu nyong chimbola ne para jurje chodoro dumbu je jona benzara amra daya sang jang soba we jong chu tang je me ba dong ba ni jeng ne ki je ge doji sak Ragur mera donji be sungur je uza be nye den doruni chom den de doje dombo gun don den ma ga je choni ba ye be doje zenga nam ga la charwe tin zo za ye den nam jambar je ba ye tu gar din zo de o zo lo ye den nam jambar je ba khal don ge je wa nam bar je marla dum be je sam dom mi do yo wa o ta do ma 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 je me tara ambara wa jin do se gen ta ba gom bo nge o je ba lu ji du ji jin jan ta ko me ta ga ba be gan da jin Rinpoche jin to me te ba kha ye ko ye chong ne jin ta da ra da ne ba ba bu ga tom jin ne tu zo ba da me ban tro wa de ye tro war am dun para a tu gra hong bo de le we zeren tu gom ba dong da we ge ba jin tro ben zara saman za za hong bo wo ni zo me ba jro la ra yong tu ge hong le we zeren tu Ringang kuru je jen chong argam su jen je om sarvata thangada beke kate samaya Shiriye wong ye sarvata be ringang kuru je je bumba tone om sarvata thangada beke kate samaya Shiriye wong ye sange on kuru ve chu jin je ko kong tamata chu ya lama jen don chirwa le me jebe O jen bara choro te ye tukra nime jen kuru je ten ta hong ting no ka ta maran ten ne zon te ye kuru Ombeza zendra maharuga no hong pe ki pe yin do bendro ya ki ma da bon kurwa te da le we zin tu lu tam ji chap ne den de de tam je sal ne ji je du zo tam je he ne ku hin de ba dong ro ni to da ra do ji yin de de ne da dang do ba ombeza zendra maharuga no hong pe da ni tu ge hong de ni jong me dong ben hong de nyom bri ga Gewande yenyu doda yedang la zong dojo nendrowa ji jong ma le te sa lang para yo ta ti ge chadur tumbu ge long te chupa yen la tene ta te ji sa la ngara zo bardu ge ti ge na ne ta chitang ge kasing ge kapsala ridu ge ne so jewa lembe ge jonda boda tene ta te gendo je bardu ge tunong chatong da tene te ji so la jewa lembe ge kapla ridu ge lamda ridu ge nowanda bo chatang ge kor ji ba je ta ti kapsala zo kan kal che ge se na ta ji so temba to kasing ma ki ba gendo Sanjie la solvata, tene trambe chue la solvata, genden la solvata pati, kenchu som jis trembata, tene ngarangi chagin la soba pombe ke cheto tonga jis trembata, tene yidam jala jis trembata, tene tingenze jis trembate, sushim jis trembate, tenam yang ni yang do gomni. Gom na ti jis teni solwa tap na chunhong namba na tsoba khere kapsalaya chunhong tenzo hiwa teni te kendo riduke niela jewe ke lam tenzo khere kapsalaya te tabu solwa tap na teni chitang ke tanda tsindige nuanda boje tene pacha tupo maimba yijilu imbi cherna tene jay depata mugu taine rang semte yaboji jor topna chunhong rakpa tenzu hiri yaba jay ta tene tejendo jay chayin chimbuge tene jewa lendap shene yana ngesong gnes jewa lendap sheba la soba ta deta buji changna ya tenhi tong poye go ne kenchu song ta sun do la soba sonde ta tene mikba la soba yaboji changna tene tinwa te njor lawa tene te imbe cherna ta deta bu riduk ne kitang riduk ne se ma yorwa riduk ne misal to ngensong ne se ma yorwa te tene rang te hi tene kapka la nyarwa la soba la je ka sin jito ko onke trobe no ta je te tene je ge yo pata yang kapka la tene chahin ke onke je ge yo pala soba in be cherna ta ti chahin to pata jito to bu ke cheto so wa ta pata tene rang sente nal ne pata tene yang kapka la ngara bardo la ye pa hi kapkala pardola ya pa jin ro ta bota te in pichna te ya temba ta hi yin tembo che rain chi mi chi che te kal che bo in sa la tene rang ke jewa lembe kapsala ya ta rap tu chona kasin kon tu pa yin to dewa jin tu ji ju ya la tene ta bi hin kong ro ta bi hin kong thang chi ge na ne je lawa ta pe chewa de dewa jin ji hin kong in pichna dewa jin tu ji ge tap 다 단다 젠달라 있나요 솔 드니 디캅슬라 있나야 드니 ngaran게 대화지는 미바데 드니 조 밤에라 솔와다 다 딘데 신네 세주가 고르데 히바레
So that was the reading transmission for the practice of the form of Vajrapani called the Vajrachanda. And now we'll continue with the explanation of the Bardo. Yesterday we saw how the light paths to the 6 states appear, and how the appearances of birth, associated with birth in the various realms, arise as well. At that time, it's important to employ the 6 recollections. That is to say, the supplication of or prayer to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the recollection of your acts of generosity in order to reverse attachment, the recollection of your yidam, and the recollection of moral discipline. Through recollecting these things, the appearances will be pacified. The reason for this is that in the Bardo, your body is a mental body. Therefore, when your state of mind changes, the appearances change as well. In particular, if in the interval of becoming you find yourself driven toward or attracted to rebirth in a lower state, then forcefully pray to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and make aspirations for a good rebirth. And by doing so, you will be able to prevent the unfortunate birth through changing the appearances and changing your state of mind. In general, in the interval of becoming, we want to avoid, if possible, a rebirth in any of the 6 states. But if that is not possible, at least we must avoid rebirth in the lower states. For example, a rebirth in the hell realm can occur in one of several ways. Sometimes you actually flee something else that terrifies you, and fleeing that, you feel driven into a hell realm. At other times, you initially perceive the hell realm as somehow attractive or desirable, and are born in it through attachment. Therefore, it's important in this phase of the interval to ensure that you are not under the power of either intense fear or intense attachment, either of which can cause an unfortunate rebirth. So at all times, it's important to keep your mind stable and, as much as possible, at rest. Now, the importance of mindfulness and alertness here cannot be overemphasized, because although in general you know at this point that you have died and that you're in the interval, that knowledge is not continuous. Sometimes you remember that this is the interval and that you're dead, but at other times you forget it. And in order to not be swept into an unfortunate birth at a time when you forget where you are to begin with, it's important to maintain mindfulness and alertness. At this point in the interval, you are attempting to choose a birth. The best birth possible is birth in a pure realm. Of all pure realms, the easiest to be born in and the most beneficial to be born in is Sukhavati, the realm of Amitabha. So in order to ensure that you can achieve rebirth in Sukhavati in the Bardo, during this life, you should carefully and assiduously amass the 4 causes of that rebirth, which I explained yesterday. Especially, constantly bring the realm to mind and pray to the Buddha Amitabha.
Tene ta te tabo jaitan. Tene ta te tabo dewajin to jeo matupanda bota. Tene ta te dewajin to jewa le tangaranzo milu topala gawanda. Tene ina tene ta tela ya jerdo tene jego madape jego gabata. Tene ta number top jego ndamba. Number 2 ore la. Tene te nane madape jego gabate la ta jerdo ngesona majiba jego gaba. Tene te jendo milu ina ya milu ngemba ta milu tapja tene la majibe tapseba. Ta tene la tene te ya je jego ngemba la je kapsula kapkala pardun jirago jira je ne omi to tene trisonda bota omi to trundu gubanda bota ta tene no charchona tene ti kapsula lama kenchola solwata tene lama kenchola randa te tene jego re sonre la tene te yang ni yang do ta tanda jene patola ngaranza tanda mesendala de pe kapsula ina ya ti sinji roje kapta tene nyengha chung kapla sopa tendela ti kaju ina ya lama kenchola sorwata tene sanje tang chanchu samba tangje la sorwata tende she na tene te kaju ina ya kamso imbe wanke tene padu gun no chain jitola sopa ji kapsula ranghi ji kencho sam jesu tempata tene rang tsawe lama jesu tempata tene ta rang yiram jala jesu tempata ranghi ki yoin be cherna tene chitang ngesong ke jego chepa la ya tig pemba cheta ngesong ke jego main na ya tene ta tanda me jewa la ya te tanjur don tembe milu chatsama maimba ten memba ndapota tendela machi vecheto tene ta tetabu yoni yondo lama kencho la solwata tene kencho son jesu ten solwata tene sen nardo pa chunhong ki jesu mandong wache ta chunhong la kapka la chunhong yapo jipu ke no hyane tela choyin ke onki jupa tene kapka la tanda yang jita chunhong dupo tende ga onge no harwa ta tende nika kare chauna ya tende ti ji su mandong wal sen naldo nene ngaran pardo la yeba te ngohi ba pardo la yeba te ngohi ne ngaran jewa lenge yeba jewa ngemba le mini ba tende ngal go go ba tundo ta pe na jewa ngemba le mini ba ta le mini ba ta tende jewa zambo le gu ba jewa zambo ndamba la ya tende ngaran ke sen naldo phamni tene jewa zambo ndamba gogi ware la tene te yang zo ta milu topni milu je jewa lembe kapso tene pama nin tong ne ta tela chakpa tang hienpan rabo je je ne 대 온기 초동거고는 유기 요소를 드니 대 센달라이나야 드니 rapto 정말 담바 넘버 타파 렘바다 데 데지오 침바 폼 가그레데 이나요 데비 로브리 엠바 폼베게 다 카신 콘트큐 바인도 게니지 담바 양 타바디 렌토나 드니 디게 찐지 투전도 산라 tenhi don poe de demba in becherna tini tetabu nalgungen balaji kapsula ya de choyin roboti mejewa tikap tanala tenhi poe laptop je ranghi ji kombe pocha zamboji ye bayin becherna jitang ke sendala je depi lopari emba pompe damba je ta ta geni je damba ta je lenji de be kalchembo imba je ta geni je damba lemba te ya tu jondo ngarange ya poji songugre tini sombe ke tenhi poe de ya poji yo na ni tepe kalchembo re.
If for whatever reason you are unable to achieve rebirth in Sukhavati, or you particularly wish to be reborn as a human being in fortunate circumstances, then the next thing you need to do is twofold. The first is called closing the doors or gates to an undesirable rebirth, and the second is consciously choosing a desirable or appropriate rebirth. Undesirable rebirths include rebirth in any of the lower states, as well as a human birth under unfortunate circumstances. Now, at this point in the interval, you may become driven by fear. In other words, the bewildered appearances that you experience being terrifying may impel you to take the first birth that comes. You have to therefore resist this tendency to panic and to take the first birth that appears rather than consciously choose it. So when in the interval you are driven by or tormented by fear, you should pray to your guru and the three jewels and ask for their help or assistance. In order to be able to do that, as with the other practices in the interval, you must establish the momentum and habit of doing so in this life. In order to do that, whenever during this life you experience fear or you perceive danger, immediately pray to the Guru and the three jewels, pray to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And by establishing the habit of that response to fear and or danger, that habit will last and will re-arise as a response to fear in the interval. You'll be able to recollect the three jewels, recollect the Guru, the Yidam, in the interval, and thereby you'll be able to prevent unfortunate rebirth. So in that way, you can prevent rebirth in lower states, and also you can prevent an inappropriate or unfortunate human birth as well. So throughout the interval of becoming, one of the principal practices is to continually recollect the Guru and the three jewels, to pray to them, and to rest your mind so that it not enter a state of panic. However, there are actually two types of bewildered appearances which are experienced during the interval of becoming, and they pose two different problems. One type of bewildered appearance is the fearsome, terrifying, threatening kind, which inspires fear, and the fear is dealt with as has been just explained. The other type is pleasant, desirable, bewildered appearances, and these generate attachment rather than fear. This craving and attachment can also cause an unfortunate birth. So you also have to have a way of not being overpowered by that. In short, at this point in the interval, you must ensure that you are not overpowered by either pleasant, bewildered appearances, which cause craving and attachment, or unpleasant ones, which cause fear. To do this, fundamentally you need to maintain the recollection that you are in the Bardo, and the strong motivation, I must not take an inferior birth, I must consciously choose a good or appropriate birth. Now, with regard to taking birth as a human being, usually beings who are about to be conceived and born human see their parents, the parents they're about to acquire, in sexual union. At that point, the being will tend to generate attachment or desire for one parent and aversion or jealousy for the other. Now, it is the combination of these two emotions, desire and aversion or resentment, that actually propels you into the womb, propels you into the birth. So if that particular human birth is not one that you want to take, you need to find some way of stopping or shutting down those two emotional states. One very powerful tool to enable you to do this is the moral discipline that you have maintained in the preceding life, in particular, given the circumstances, moral discipline connected with sexuality. If you were a monastic in the preceding life, the habit of the maintenance of monastic discipline will be a strong force enabling you to shut down the emotions of desire and resentment that arise. But even if you're not a monastic, if you have received the upasaka vow, and among the upasaka vows in particular, the vow to abstain from adultery, this is a tremendous help as well. Because the momentum of mindfulness that's established when you take such a vow, that throughout your life is maintained as the thought, I must not commit adultery, will, like other such momentums, arise in the interval. At that point, the arising of this habit of moral discipline connected with sexuality can be used to stop the mindless reaction of desire and resentment when seeing your prospective parents that will otherwise propel you powerlessly into the womb. And that is one of the reasons why taking this particular upasaka vow is so helpful and important, because of the momentum that it establishes.
Tene ta te ta bu je gu ga pa ta je gu ndam ba ta nga ra je sem te hi ba ye ga go ne sem na do pa ni ken jo som so wa ta ne tini je wa sang bu je lem ba ma lam ta je de ta je wa len ju de be kal che ge la tini ta te tar do ji tang ge ta je par du ge te number ye Jene Bardo, Tene Cheke Bardo, Juni Bardo, Sipa Bardo de number Yeson Rela. Tene Tati Bardo Muma de Tan Cheke Bardo da Jay, Tene Juni Bardo da Ni, Sipa Bardo Somre, Jene Bardo de Tandi Mesendal Rela, Tene Bardo Sumbo de Cap de Nala, Tene Cheke Bardo la Dungan Mepaje. Ni chuni parto London roaje la chuni parto London mando na sipa parto teon teni pe parchi ta jengi me pa ji rap de na ta pe hin hon ro to pa na de ta ba ma jon na yo milu chudin ji milu zang ma to pa je tap de ta gal che ge yo la ti tap de gal che wa de ta chitang ge ti kap tna la ya gal che ge yo re te yin na ya Ti kap tana la long hong yong me yong de tanda chen de ge kambe pacha la rale ba yin bicherna tene bardo sumbo te ge na ne de la pento chewa te tene tanda jehi bardo ta mesendal te ne gal che ge yore mesendal te ne gal che ge yore la gal chewa te ya pe ngaranzo kalwa zambo jong yore cherdo tanjuru ji milu Rinpoche matab na tene je tanda tambe je somba zambo zam ta tene je jitang jeba zambo zam seju ge kokap ndabu yue na mato nguni ge tambe ju cha sangwa je nyangsa lembe kokap meba je tene milu top na ya tambe ju je go la mayu na tene te tardo ta je jitang dewar hibi nimbo ye petab je khahela somba zambo tang dembanda ko ta jelom zambo tang dembanda ko te le zambo ndabo so thu ge yore te yina ya nguni ge ne de nbe ge tene chue de nyamsle thu ge yo mare la junsin teacher na ngaranso tanda kalwa zambo je la milu tho ye ba je ta milu thopa te ya tanjur tsangma tene tambi chue dan temba tambi chue dan tepege milu tsangma de top ye ba yin becherna tene ta ngaranzo tanda ndi ge kap tena la tene tanda sendala ya jingi to parchi me ba je ta tene jewa chima la ya lutin ngemba mango ba je ta dandi ge kokap zambo je top yo la kokap zambo top kap tena la tene tuze thola matongwa je be kalchewa tene kasi tutup ge nyamni nanggu ge yoba je da tene ta te la ya tanda nyamni nanggu ge yoba je da tene yang kafkala thi khahi ge na la tene chha je chitare tene hiro thugu mare suanda go yore de ina ya te tanda tsendala tambi chula kulman nang ge chetula tene namare la tene ta te jitang ge tanda tsendala ina ya tene ribatem chikhala ina ya tene tenhi pa ye tene rangi me yin chiwege zhu sepa taba je ina ya ta kasin konti hibare la jitang ge nyemombo ondo mahirwa je ta senti naldo paptaba je tene hisaini jang je karigugi yore se na jerdo tanda je tanda partu tudu la sopan denju ta dekendo tambi chuji jawa se ju ta tene dekendo je chogala sopa soma samugi chogala sopa la tene ta tanda sen parupo te jewa ngamba manongpa je tende ke tap seju te ape kalchambore la tene te kahi ke na hitsar ne choga tama te zang peng maare se suwayon yore te ina ya te ta je te ta hitsar ne choga la sopa tanga dek dogre sampe ke lelo la sopa jewa tang tambi chu la zendu chong tu doga la sopa ke nyembo rabo je suware mato tene tanda tene te pento meba mare la tene te tabu xene melam zambo jayan rabo tang tene te yendo choga zambo tangyan rabo tang tene te yendo himbo ti tento gewe zawa saya la sopa tenzo ya tene pe pento chenpo re
In that way, you close the door or gate to an undesirable birth, which is stopping birth that you don't want to take or preventing it. The other thing you're doing at this point in the interval is choosing a birth. And principally you do this by consciously recollecting and repeatedly reinforcing your aspiration to take a certain type of rebirth. And the combination of preventing undesirable births and aspiring toward a certain type of birth will allow you to consciously choose the circumstances of your birth. As we've seen in this presentation, there are 4 intervals. The interval of this life, the interval between birth and death, the interval of the time of death, the interval of dharmata, and the interval of becoming. Of these 4, what we're usually referring to when we say the Bardo, or the interval, is the 3 latter ones: the interval of the time of death, the interval of dharmata, and the interval of becoming. So, in that sense, when we talk about the intervals, it seems that what's important is those 3, and the interval of this life is not so important. However, what happens to us in those 3 intervals, dying and after death, really depends principally upon what we do in this life. What we want to achieve is an experience of the interval of the time of death that is without suffering, an experience of the interval of dharmata where there is recognition and awareness, and an experience of the interval of becoming where we can consciously choose our rebirth, either in a pure realm or an excellent human birth. But all of these things, the successful traversal of these 3 intervals, principally depend upon the habits that we create during this life, the interval between birth and death. So in that sense, the most important interval is the interval of this life. In particular, we are extremely fortunate in that our experience of this present interval between birth and death is the experience of a precious human existence. If someone is a human being but does not possess the freedom and resources that characterize a precious human existence, then the best they can do is cultivate a state of benevolence and good behavior. And that is quite possible. People who do not have a precious human existence can be benevolent, they can behave well, they can therefore accumulate good karma, because they too have Buddha nature. But what they cannot do, because they have no access to Dharma, is effectively prepare for the Bardo. Now we can prepare for this effectively because of the resources and freedom that we have, because we have access to Dharma. So therefore, our precious human life is not only a situation of resources that make this life more pleasant, but a situation of resources that we can use to ensure that all future lives are more pleasant as well. So use this time, this interval, and these resources as best you can, and practice as much as you can. Nevertheless, some commentaries on the intervals say things like that once you're dead or once you're dying, it's too late. There's nothing you can do. If you didn't practice assiduously in the preceding life, then it's too late. This is not actually true. This is said in order to encourage you, who, reading that, are presumably still within this life, to practice by recognizing the tremendous value and tremendous importance of it. It is not the case that what happens while you're dying and even after your death is unimportant. A great deal can be achieved. Therefore, at the time of your death, pay careful attention to the circumstances. Try to maintain, as much as possible, mindfulness and alertness. Surround yourself with caregivers or companions who are conducive to the proper and conscious traversal of the Bardo. And above all, try to rest your mind. Even though in texts that principally are encouraging practice in this life, it's said that nothing can be done for someone after their death, this is not true. There is a great deal that can be done for someone. After someone has died, the recitation of the Great Liberation through hearing in the Bardo, the performance of special rituals, purification ceremonies, and so on, all of these things can help the person tremendously. When commentaries say these things are not much use, it's too late, they're saying that because if they said these things are going to help tremendously, there's a danger that we would become lazy by thinking, well, I don't have to practice. All I have to do is make sure that after I die, people perform purification rituals, and that'll take care of it. So to reverse that potential problem, the texts say it's too late. They're not going to do any good. You've got to do it yourself now. So take those statements in context and understand that in your own case and in the case of those you know, the engagement by survivors of aspirations, in purification ceremonies, in the making of offerings and so on the deceased person's behalf, are all of tremendous benefit.
Tene tatige partuge te truparela tene tanda tesumsina tuanda mangjona ta kai hido limfuna.
So that is the instruction on the intervals. It's over. Now, if you would like to ask any questions, go ahead.
I have one teeny question and then one a little larger one. The teeny one is, if Rinpoche could mention what the mantra associated with the Vajrapani visualization practice is.
Tewa chungchung chik tang chimpo chik yoris. Tewa chungchung de palchadna doje tombo ge nga kare.
Te tanda chitang ke chon doji ge nyamle be mangbuyo mandawa mangbuyo ba. Teni khasin ke wang de tanda teni mama rejungpa malari pa mama rejungpa. Teni khonga nasa dubo ji chungwa la. Teni tige jinji kong jagala pe jagarne teni dhamma ishu de rejung lo ji chodur tumbo singe ji yo la. Tige wang da tige nyamne la. Teni ta tere ge ngwa la ombezar zendra maha roha na kong pe isge ji wale.
Well, there are a lot of different Vajrapani practices, many different forms of the deity, and therefore many different mantras. The empowerment that was given yesterday was for a form of Vajrapani that's called Vajrachanda, or the indestructible, ferocious one. And the Vajrachanda, this particular lineage of Vajrachanda practice comes from Rechungpa, the disciple of Milarepa, who at a certain point in his life became seriously ill and went to India in part in order to receive treatment and instruction that would alleviate his illness. While in India, he received this Vajrachanda empowerment and practice, and by practicing it, he cured himself of his illness. And this lineage has been passed down through time, and that's what was transmitted yesterday. The mantra for this particular form of the deity is Om Vajrachanda Maharokana Hom Pai, or Om Banzara Tsanda if you want, however, you know. Om Vajra Tsanda or Vajrachanda Maharokana Hom Pai. Dere doa. Tanzanga yiki kashi shogido. Om Banzara Tsanda Maharokana Hom Pai de tsamre doa. Yeah, I get confused because there's other mantras that are almost the same. Then what was your second
quick
question?
Is the Shitro practice. Would that fall into one of the three types of practices, aspirations, offerings, or the third one I can't recall already, that you were just talking about?
Oh,
I was
okay.
wondering when that could be used, if it would be used in the company of a dying or deceased person, and at what point?
That the shitru dakche de that the shenda shiwe kapsu de pejetanya yorepe konso ke pempele the gomna pengrebe yana konso mashi gomna nyonde gom
신의 겁나요 팽그래 와 근데 왜 저도든다고 된서 제 힘보 되게 되게 양한다보다 되게 저도 겁나 팽그래.
Yes, yeah, it could be used. In that case, during the emanation and withdrawal of light rays, which is part of the visualization in connection with the mantra repetition, you would principally think that the light rays purify the either dying or deceased person of their wrongdoing and obscurations. And this would be a source of great benefit.
Well, that was one of my questions, so now I only have one now. You mentioned when the being is about to be born and what they're attracted to, and they see aversion in one parent and desire in another.
No, they have aversion for one and a desire for another. Yeah.
Right. Is that normal, or what is the best emotions that they, are they always going to have aversion to one and desire to another, or is there...
Do you mean, is that going to continue during the life, or what do you mean?
No, well, that, but also, will it always be like that? You will always have aversion to one and desire to another?
In the Bardo.
In the Bardo.
That the milu cheveke ngado mashu gong ke kapde the pama de zotone de ne chikla chakpa chikla dangwa yongre songs. De ngatso ke milu kadulena de do yongrebe.
다 le takpa 다보지나 되네 대답만 이봐 제와는 바다 le 마다봐 대인은 양 지도한다고 지금 지왕은 발래봐 le 마도 이 발체를 다대 자동 그거는 주바대 여행들이 성료래.
It depends upon the degree of the person, what kind of karma the person has. If someone has very good or very pure karma, then their motivation for taking that human rebirth will not be desire and resentment. If they have very bad karma, their motivation for taking that human rebirth will be fear rather than desire and resentment. But those who take human rebirth through sort of middling karma do so through that combination of emotions.
And also, we're used to being awake in this lifetime and then going to sleep at night, and we have a habit of awake and asleep. In the Bardo, is there an actual experience of feeling awake and then you're asleep, or is it the same all through?
Tata ngatsu tse de la sepe nekap ta ni kokpe nekap ni yore. Takpa de ni ki remosu do nyomso nyong yore. De bakjak je Bardo la nepe kapso de zamzam sepe nekap ke chadawa dang zamzam ni kokpa chadawa de ge nyong yongrepe.
Te yonggo 말해.
Nope.
다코라 바두 좀 호텔 마도 방아란 소리 있는 제만이야.
Ore. No, it seems that Bardo beings don't think about going to sleep. They don't have that kind of cycle. They don't have a sleep cycle.
Rinpoche, after hearing the description of the practices to achieve rebirth in Dewa Chen, I can understand how some other forms of Buddhism, such as Pure Land, devote their entire system to such practices. How is it, given that it seems so important and not as difficult as many other practices that we've heard about, I guess my question is how is it that this is, you know, maybe only one small part of all the practices that we typically hear about.
That Dewa Chen to Chewa Lama ke Penyon dang le labo yemba dezo gotsane dene nangpe chulok pena janat dang ribbon la sopa kashela de kona mego de jawa hako gyores. Penyon chetse dang dene suyena drup totse la san lo tawa yena dene ngatso ke di kona mego de manzawa ke jitsen chire. Nyamlen shenda dezo de tata drup de rong merong rawa ke samla nenang de ma se drup de rongwan rawa yores.
Te la tene konso susu la mupa susu ta kalba susu mandawa yore la tene teacher na tambe chuge nyamlin na chopa se tambe chuge nyamlin mambo se mandawa se na te penso chibo yore tene te ya perna sagante la chitang tujondo tene ndenda buti da palenda butangwa sude la yanko ko tego dano kanya mete tene to ne higmare te ina sagante gna tene paleti ma to tunjmena tene ti sagante tsoya ba kaya yogo bare la mala yan fenki do kaya to mare teacher na sagante na sama mandawa namba na sopa yana te jai sa ni sa tene kanga tuwa chempo tene kanga sa mupa tuwa chipo yapa yundawa chi yungra te yindala tene kanga lupo la ya tene zupo chi tsarwa tene pento chempo tene yungra la pe te yindala ngaransu chu nyamsu lempe kasi la ya tene namba na sopa nyamsu lona kasa kani ya pento chempo tene te yapa yungra
The reason is that individuals vary in their wishes, their aspirations, and their capacities. So therefore, overall, there is more benefit in presenting a wide variety of practices than there is in attempting to cause all practitioners to conform to one particular approach. It's a little bit like having a restaurant. A person could survive on just one type of food. A person could, Rinpoche said, just eat rice for the rest of their life, or bread, and they would fill their bellies. But if you opened a restaurant and you only served bread and one type of bread, no one would go there. So for the sake of the survival of your business, you have to serve a variety to appeal to people's tastes. And also, it's more benefit. It's better for people if they don't just eat bread. Well, in the same way, in order to attract beings to Dharma, and in order to supply all of their spiritual needs, it's better if there are a variety of teachings.
Rinpoche, this is somewhat related. Together with Sukhavati, we hear a lot about the copper-colored mountain, and also, which is associated with Padmasambhava, and also the kingdom of Shambhala, celestial kingdom of Shambhala, associated with the Rigdons. And my understanding is that Mipam Rinpoche, for example, announced that he would be reborn in the kingdom of Shambhala before he died. So my question is, are both of those realms, do they fall in the category of the Dharmakaya or Sambhogakaya pure realms, or would they be in some other category?
Okay. That shinkam, chitanso shinkam ge kola, jengso ngatso ge the shinkam sum ge kesha mambo goju yores. Chiktina dewa chenji shinkam dang. Nusena zangdo pare pemoe ji shinkam dang. Sumpala Jongcho Shambala Shingam, de sum de la Goju Mompiores. Dewa Chenji Shing de Tenten Shing Namprata Pachiris. De Chikshe Ni de Zando Pare Dang Jang Shambala Deni Tata Chukuham Longko ke Dakbe Shing Yanam Yana Truku ke Shing Yanam Dakba Yanam Madakba Yanam Kandare. Dona Dakbe Shing Repe, Madakbe Shing Repe Dang. Pena Gonge Tata de Kenjen Mepamke ke Longten Yore, Korek de Jang Shambala la Kochungi Inge, Longten Nangwadawa ke Pache de Chewa Longken Yopada. Yana Tata de Penyon Chechon Dang. dak madake ke ko tesono no
dewa jinji shinkote ta tanda ngaranzu benlong no de somya ndene ni manup chorona tangme jidin mambu paruna se ta te papi shinkom yapa ngaranzu tanda lutin di tane lep tu me panda pota tini melam jabna mahum bala jeto panda pota tende somyo rala te tar re teni shambala sondo parasingite chitang ta takwa ta madaba ni nani ta ngaran sinjitin palpag jewe ne ta potende songyo la teni te ya
deni jiktin papa ke chevenere nika jiktin papa ke chevenere
jewe ne re te ina ya ta chitang jitin de la ponjur mambo Ponjur Mambundroga la Tene Ponjur Mambundroa in Bicherna Tatanda Perna Meche Lohi Jag Nena America Leona Satonte Yor Sapa Kaya Yom Tene Lo Nija Zong Lena Ya Jay Lova Sajanda Yotis. Tene Tanda Ledu Telape Panjulonti Jebo Ndapote. Teni ya lo nija sunja tegi jili na kandiwa na kagi. Ta te njiro mambu, neki senkinti njiro mambu ndogre wa. Pe te yandala, teni jitin la yung njiro mambu ndogre yore la, jiji senkin kia patang, teni longlin tang kangala njiro mambu ndogre yore wa. Teni te yando, teni sondo par tang, shambala te, teni sasakana yungi yopa yang, mahopala, teni tusi kadu yungi yopa yang, teni te tanda, teni ngaranzo, hi togmanduwa, teni te, di kap tena la, takwa, yakwo, teni chui tarwa, tata perna, tanda sondo pachiro raboche yena, teni pagotong kando mamambo yopa, tene shambala yena tene makanga jeba zangboda tene kanga yabu yaba ta tene songyo raba teacher na tene tuse loja nija sunja kadu lewi yaba yen tene te kandijin mahung pala tarung yaba yen tene tenso tene ngaranso hi matapanda injere henda so
penar
tene suwa tatanda pesinani suwa yendala korate yung raba te
Tata yanam maumbangi yanam.
Tatanda neji la pin ponjur mambo suwa la tene perna kuma peg sajate choge sajayimba jansoge sajayimba tene tiji ni ha pakaje la te sadon da kontre da ya kapje la main roa chapa yang kapje la tambichu yapo tarwa da pata tende neji la ponjur dong do yorwa
Zazazogo. Nga pe zazazogo mata nga tsanyika gola legereta. Well, Sukhavati is a pure realm, which among other things means you can't get there physically. It's not on this planet. As it says in the aspiration for rebirth in Sukhavati, innumerable worlds distant from here to the direction of in the direction of the setting sun. That's how it begins, and so on. So you can't travel to Sukhavati physically. You can only be born there, and only under certain circumstances. Shambhala and the glorious copper-colored mountain are places on this planet. And anyone could be born there. The thing about realms within this planet, which basically means sites or countries in this planet, is that as we know well, circumstances change tremendously over time. For example, if you consider what we now call the United States of America, if you had been here somehow long enough ago, there would have been nobody here. And if you had been here after that, there would have been some people, the people we now call Native Americans. And if you're born here now, you have what we have now. And if you're born here 200 or 300 years from now, who knows? So, although it's taught that there are very good things about these two places, good things about Shambhala, good things about the glorious copper-colored mountain, the texts don't specify when they're talking about. Whether they are like that now, whether they were like that in the past, or whether they're going to be like that at some point in the future. For example, when they talk about Shambhala, they talk about an enlightened society in which everyone behaves in an exemplary fashion and everything is good. But we don't know if Shambhala is like that yet. We don't know if that's a prediction of something that's going to be true hundreds of years in the future. When they talk about the glorious copper-colored mountain, they talk about a place that is filled with dakas and dakinis. All the males are dakas and all the females are dakinis. But again, we don't know if that place is like that yet. It might be talking about the distant future. If you think about Tibet, we think of Tibet as being a certain way, but in fact, it's changed a great deal. If you go back far enough in time, Tibet was under the ocean. And then after it was no longer under the ocean, it was an empty desert, a wasteland. And then there were people. And then there was Dharma. And now there is what there is. So in that way, terrestrial realms are somewhat unstable.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Rinpoche, you had talked many times about the importance of dream practice and lucid dreaming and transforming dreams. And I was wondering if you could give us some form of a simplified visualization practice for us to do every night when we go to bed, and your blessing also in achieving the realization of it.
Data de milam ngosongwa dang, jangwa dang, chujur tangwa de zo ema ze galchenpo yin yangsi songmares. De yansang dene so ni kukpe kaso milam ngosongwa dang, jangwa dang, chujur tong topa ke mikpa le labo dang mikpa de gomdorongwa ke nangwa nangro nangse.
다텔라 투모 마인 비미바 요요레 요요레 데 인나야 다티 베나 단다 냠네 소소 땡니 테니 다 당보 냠네 자 정어른 바 일들 세고 요레바 당하랑게 투모가 온데시디 슈디텔라 두전도 땡히 보예데 이게 갑슬라야 땡히 보예데 자자세 데 니몰라야 하랑게 tumomayin pe no ya ten semolaya ten hipoye teni zatni kale nyeko teni nye malam zon teni tikap tana la yang kap kala malam zon to panda boje jona teni malam jangwa to malam juro ten zo malam jangwa singe te ya ta chitang malam ka kapsula no harge yore de yina te kora tombe ronzu ma to kaya yo marela te toni imbala hiba ngarang tunno imbala hiba te teni tunno imbala hiba te be kalchewa imba te ta teni te tunno imbala yaboji hidu te la malam jordu judu de la tene kandi yina ngemba sambola jirwa chunchu chembola jirwa tene megewa de gewala ya jirwa la so pa siena tene tige ngarang nyamni la ya pengi yorela tene partun chun la yo deta ko pengi yorela tene deta bo je nyamni siena kanga ya pore sombato la tene mixal ga menga tenzo tene ta jidang nyamni si somna susu ki nyamni si teja gomja ta tene se jure ma to tene ta se ya te tamonto tomchu ro chi se na hiro chobe ban ro chi la te ju si ti cherna ngaran su tu jun to ten hi boy ten ju tera kar chi gre so.
As you indicated in your question, there exists particular techniques or visualizations which can be used in order to facilitate lucidity, training, and transformation of the dream state. These techniques or visualizations, however, are particular to the whatever particular system or cycle of practice they come from. And in all cases, they can only be done when the person has completed the entire system of practice up to the point at which they are taught. The fundamental thing that gives you the ability to master the dream state, however, is maintaining mindfulness and alertness throughout the day, throughout the waking state. And through the momentum of doing that, being able to maintain as much as possible mindfulness and alertness as you go to sleep. Through this, and through the intention to have lucid dreams, to train the dream state, and to transform the dream state, you gain the ability to do so. Lucid dreaming, of course, refers simply to recognizing that you are dreaming while you are dreaming. Training the dream state refers to, in the context of a lucid dream, being able to recognize the dream appearances as empty, as mere bewildered projections. And transformation of dreams means the subsequent ability founded in lucid dreaming and the recognition of the emptiness of dream appearances, the subsequent ability to change the content of dreams, to change bad dreams into good dreams, to alter things, to change their size or nature or appearance, to transform unvirtuous situations into virtuous ones, and so on. Now, if someone wishes to, in addition to the basic practice of mindfulness and alertness, which Rinpoche said is the most important thing, the most important factor here, if someone, in addition to that, wishes to employ specific techniques to facilitate lucidity, training, and transformation of dreams, then you need to undertake the complete practice from start to finish of the particular system from which those particular instructions come. And it is forbidden to teach these in a public setting.
Thank you. And Rinpoche, when I was discussing not eating a lot of bread and rice in your diet, the menu, there's a lot of other things on the menu, just to let you know that.
Tata Rinpoche ke dine balat dang shadre de nika she melopa korang shu tsaware de insan dine de dawa ke zakan la tsane mape.
Rinpoche, while you're in the Bardo state, you encounter other beings in the Bardo state. And if you have enough stability, is it possible to help those beings? And if so, how?
Tata Bardo semchen de so ke pensun tongi orese. De insan dine rang te tsam sempa tempo rawayana Bardo semchen shenda la ropo soya yorepe dang.
Zotuguraya.
Dine kanra zotugure.
Bardo tachirang pandolo chongi chulmando tene noaya puchi tene sinro robasito puchi.
Yeah, you can. You can do it by telling them, first of all, you're in the Bardo. Try not to become too bewildered and allow your mind to come to rest and things like that.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Tujie Rinpoche, and Tujie for all your teachings and all your blessings. I'm trying to deepen my understanding of karma. And my understanding is that grasping, clinging to a self, is what holds karma together, cause and effect. You mentioned the quieting of the karmic winds at the time of death, and you spoke of the result, possible results of that, but I'm trying to understand what the causes of that loosening of karma at the time of death might be.
That the chedonso the leju devo ke kolare pena sengama dan chema ke dralsundro. Chedonso ngatso ke le de jude ke zonya kam jude ke mutuya de dagzines. Dagzin yopala tane de jude lo ame bayore segedo. De setsane de segedo. Dene de dampo morang de ses. Dene chedonso data lechi junde de dang lechi lungla drawa khandra yore dang se chegi jokde lechi lung konzo ma shiwada de ma shina yo se pena de se tamade de lechi lung de so shigi yore se lechi lung de so shiwa am timpe kapso yenang le junma cheba yore se dana de le junma cheba yana leche long de so shiwa am tempe ke ju kare.
Leche long singite tanda ngaran tsuge ta talapun tu long diore ba.
Ah, tala ore.
Talapuya long diore ba.
Ore.
Tende da ko mainta. Ta che chitang leche long singite yongul ge rete la long ge konda ko jela. Sungi yorwa, te sungi yorwa la, tini tiki leche long tiki njurwa la tini penna ngaranda boche yena tangpo leche long tini pogu chung chung che, tini leche long ki rinpe yendo lo zonde, tini mechembo che, tini leche long ki lo zonde, megengo che, ta tini leche long ki soso la, tini zoni, ta tini zogi yorwa. Te zodu te la, tene leche long te la, leche long mambu yung rwa. Ta ngaran su mei lu tene chewe leche long te nupa te se do rwa. Ten kwa tena la, zo do yo rwa. Yang leche long yendo yung rwa. Kora pato long do leche long te. Jewa chema lembe leche long ta. Te leche, te yung ta. Jewa je, inchi minchi ta leche long che. Ta kora tombo le kare so yo na. Te leche long te yung te la, milu len. Milu tin ta zo, te leche long nipa ti se, te milu ti chasang zo. Ta yang jewa chima la tini le kare so yo be leche long tin treba ti yung kore ba.
To na leche long te nipa gak dog marwa.
Chasang gak
ma.
Ta koran ti le sengi te koran dodo te ma yinpa. Le mambu yo rwa, ti nipa te se do rwa. Le rinpa yinto lo zo do di. Perna tanda le la, pensi je le dan, zozi je le sinkin da kota tende song yo re la, teni te la pensi gewe mpong la, zozi me gewe zoba, pensi me gewe mpong la, zozi gewe zoba, pensi gewe mpong la, zozi gewe zoba, pensi me gewe mpong la, zozi me gewe zoba. Rapo ta tende nomba na sopa tende song yo re la, tende perna pensi tende gewe mpong la, zozi me gewe zopa te perna meche tende che tambo gewe mpong te lutin yapo che milun rapo che to njorba tang tempan rapo chong na yang tende takpa nandumu rapo takpa chengen pa te depan rapo tende yungi yo re la ten rapo che yena pensi gewe mpong la, zozi me gewe zopa rapo ta yang pe na tundro ndabo je yin na yang tundro la penji me gewe mpomba re zoji gewe zopa kora pe seka la jipo tene sege pomba mepa kanga desa jipo yoba zubo debo yoba ndabo tende yungi wara te penji me gewe mpomba zoji gewe zopa te pe na me kake tene pe jipo luten tangbo zangbo naza mepa parche mepa ta tende yungi wara la chuen dropa tenzo yin na penji gewe mpomba zoji gewe zopa ta ti penji to zoji tenzo ramba yin tena kakala tene zo nukyo araba penna meji yinna ya ta tanda pe michi ki te la ya pe nasa mangbo yunki te zi zozi migiwi zopan rabo ji yinna ya michi mi la ya koi pe jibu tene nasa meba zubo debo tende le jilang te koran koran jorro karaba te.
First of all, karmic wind is not a physical thing. It is not like physical wind which blows dust or leaves around. What's meant by karmic wind is movement and therefore change. So as long as there is a process of change, that change constitutes what we call karmic wind. For example, the transformation of a human being throughout their life as they mature from a child to an adolescent to an adult is a process of what we call karmic wind. So when at the end of your life the karmic wind associated with that life is used up, this is not the exhaustion of all karmic winds. It is the exhaustion of one stream of karmic wind among many that are active in a person's continuum. For example, the karmic wind of entering the Bardo is becoming active for that person. One thing you need to remember is that karmic wind, the process of karmic momentum, is not unitary. A large number of streams of imprints of actions are functioning at any one time. So at any one time, some of these are being used up, and new ones are starting, and other ones are continuing, and so on. So the pacification or cessation of some karmic winds does not mean the exhaustion of all karmic winds. In broad terms, there are two types of karma that cause a certain life. These are called casting karma or propelling karma and completing karma. You could have good casting karma and good completing karma. You could have bad casting karma and bad completing karma. You could have good casting karma and bad completing karma, or you could have bad casting karma and good completing karma. So, for example, a case of good casting karma and bad completing karma is where someone is born as a human being under good circumstances, but thereafter is always sick or always afflicted by mishap. An example of bad casting karma and good completing karma is you're born as an animal, but thereafter you spend your whole life happily living in great comfort with adequate food and shelter, and you're never sick. An example of good casting karma and good completing karma is you're born human, and throughout your whole life you have good health, you're happy, you practice Dharma, and so on. And then there's the other possibility as well. Of course, it's much more complicated than that, because, for example, even within the completing karma, there can be a change during the life. For example, a person could be born as a human being, and for the first part of their life undergo all manner of mishaps or sickness or deprivation, and then their whole life could change, and they could spend the second half of their life in great happiness. So we're out of time. So could those of you who are still in line be the first to ask questions this afternoon?
Teni tanda ngarang jitang ta tanda yang kama pa kudung chete yana yudu te ngarang so kanga nyamda jal sama ba jong song te yana ya teni tanda mota pa kin se sama pa tende kanga yung do la teni ngarang jima kale jalge yana te terin no banjar denki yana jar tu petni ngarang samna endi ga tahi jepate teni tombo sarje nyamdende sabato ji chungare yena ya cheting kende na petni chenam be ga samna tahi jepate chitang silaje de tenjur se yo mare da chang pare te madewa da yore te yena ya tem da na te sawa lomdon roa pento chewa te ngarang ngone kahi loma kahi kanto ta kale yung do se de dan kure sla du kahi le pento pa ngone ale lo chong song na tin te je phune ta che na ba ya che te la pet na sra te song na ya pu yo re se hyuin.
I had planned to go to visit the stupa of His Holiness the Jawan Kamapa here this afternoon, and my intention was that we would all go together. Subsequently, I was informed that there is a parking issue connected with this, and I was discouraged from doing this. So, to compromise, what I would suggest is that any or all of those of you who wish to visit and see the stupa go this afternoon, and I'll go later on my own. My original intention was that when we all went together, we would all recite the words of auspiciousness together. And so, having modified that intention, I would still encourage those of you who go there as a group today to see the stupa and visit it and circumambulate it, to recite the words of auspiciousness together when you do so. The words of auspiciousness is a liturgy, a short liturgy that is renowned for its benefit, its immediate benefit in the transformation of circumstances and the generation of auspiciousness of all kinds. Now, I have a copy of this liturgy to distribute. It is only the transliteration. It is without the translation. But even if you use this, I have observed that people who make use of it are able to quickly transform circumstances for the better. When people have come to me with difficult circumstances, I've often recommended that they begin to use this liturgy, and they and I have observed a remarkable benefit from its use, so I would encourage you to chant it when you visit the stupa.
Yeah.
Thank you.